Hi, this is Robin of Loxley, here to do another episode of My Masculine Musings as we dive into the New Testament following Come Follow Me. This week's lesson is on two chapters, Matthew 2 and Luke 2, and I want to talk about some of the masculine traits that I saw in the characters of these two chapters. First of all, let's start off with Joseph. I talked a little bit about Joseph last week also, but I just want to talk a little bit about how I feel it is impressive that God came to Joseph in a dream and said, Joseph, you need to get your family out to Egypt. And Joseph, of course, was obedient and saved Jesus from the slaughterings of King Herod of all the young baby boys. Now, what I find interesting about this is that God can and has, I've read stories of God protecting people by striking dead attackers, and he could have done that here, and the soldiers could have come to the home of Jesus, taken him out, tried to kill him, and he could have been divinely protected. But instead, God gives Joseph that calling. Hey, it is your job as the father to protect your family, so go and do it. Now, he did give him guidance, go to Egypt, and that will do it. He gave him some guidance on how to do that, but he left that in Joseph's care. And I think that's important. God could step in and protect all of us in certain ways. In many ways, he does with his tender mercies and his power. But he gives us fathers that responsibility, and we should not shirk on that. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the wise men. I think the wise men, even though we don't know that much about them, some conjecture, some guessing what their lives were like can help us to think about what kind of masculine things that we can do to emulate them and become righteous masculine men. I'm just going to go right through my whole righteous masculine model. If you need to see that video, the link is in the description below. But let's start at the base. The sure foundation is a relationship with God. Now, I don't know what religion these guys were, but it's obvious that they were close enough to God to recognize a sign that was given by God. And I'm sure they didn't just wake up and be like, oh, there's a star. I know what that star means. They probably worked on this. Well, I don't know. But when it came, they knew what it meant, and they went and gave glory to the new king. So, first of all, we also should have a sure foundation, a connection with God, so that we can be guided when we need to be guided. Secondly, the first pillar of this model is health. These guys had to be healthy. They weren't riding there in a car or a train. Now, maybe they rode a camel and didn't walk that much, but it wouldn't surprise me if they walked and had the camel just carry the tents and things like that. But even if they did ride a camel, I'm sure every night they set up camp and they set up a tent or tents for all of them and made a fire. They might have gone and done a little bit of hunting every day. Every morning they broke down their camp and they went forward again. They were healthy enough to do anything that was required to get them from the east over to Jerusalem and then to Bethlehem. The second pillar is working with other men. I think it's important that us men, we have good, strong relationships with other men. And it wouldn't surprise me if these wise men also brought their servants and their families, and maybe even their servants' families. But whether or not their families came, their wives and their kids, they were spending a lot of time with the other wise men in the camp, probably riding together, talking together, things like that. So that's very important. I think they had that. The third pillar is competency. We want to become leaders, competent in at least one area of our lives, and become leaders or even alpha in one particular area of our lives where we can say, that's the direction we're going, and let's get there. And I believe that these guys had it. First of all, they were in some kind of situation where when they saw the sign, they were able to drop all of their responsibilities and do the traveling that they needed to do. So that means that they probably were successful enough in whatever endeavors they had, whether that was farming or ranching or some business. They were successful enough, became leaders in that business so that when it came time, they could leave it behind and have the financial needs to go and do what they needed to do. And so I might be conjecture, I might be reaching on that, but I can make that assumption. The fourth pillar is having an adventure and a goal. I think every man should have a few adventures planned out and some big goals in our lives, and we should be working on those. Now, I don't know how long these guys were waiting. Maybe like Anna and Simeon, who were in the temple when Jesus was brought. Maybe they knew that they would see Jesus before they died. Maybe they knew they'd get to see the birth of the new king. But whether or not they were waiting for it, when it came, they had an adventure planned out. Within a few days, I'm sure, they had a plan, they had their stuff together, and they were moving on that adventure. So likewise, I think it's important that we need to have things in our life that bring us fire, that we get excited about, and that we go after. Big adventures and big goals. Lastly are the three pillars, to provide, preside, and protect. And I think they are a really good demonstration of providing. The gold, frankincense, and myrrh that they brought was not particularly cheap, if I understand what the prices for that were in Jesus' time. And they had some symbolism in each one of those gifts, but their value was high enough that they were providing, the wise men were providing very well with these gifts to Jesus and his family. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on this week's learnings for Matthew and Luke's chapters 2 in both those books. If you saw something else, or if you wanted to chime in, leave a comment down below, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.